It's now time for In Perspective.
It is the right approach, and I will not stand here and allow my country to go down. It is not your country alone. Not your country alone. Damn foolishness. I have had to be dealing with this. Mr. Speaker, allow me.
No, hold on.
We have had to be dealing with this issue over and over and over again. When are we going to pay attention to rules in this country? It is by the rules that we will succeed. And for a Prime Minister to stand up and tell us that she's not going to pay attention to the rules.
No, hold on.
The PNP finds himself in a quandary of credibility. They have a credibility crisis.
Listeners, I want to read to you a portion of what the Honorable Justice Gay, MacDonald Bishop, and Justice Batts stated in ruling in the matter of Williams versus Holness. The justices conclude, and I quote, "No liberal and generous interpretation which this court has been invited to give to the Constitution could serve to validate those letters and the action of the defendant, that is Mr. Holness, in using them to remove the claimant, Mr. Williams, from the Senate. To uphold the validity of such a scheme and what emanated from it would be to place our revered constitutional democracy on a very slippery slope." They went on. "It would mean that a resignation could be extracted from any office holder against his will by false, fear, or fraud, and still be held valid on the mere basis that the letter of resignation was signed by him. This could not have been the intention of the framers of the Constitution, who sought to establish a political structure based on democracy and respect for the fundamental rights, freedoms, and dignity of every individual." End of quote. Listeners, this is damning. But you know what, listeners? Like you, I welcome the decision by the court. Because at the end of the day, it shows that our court is working. Listeners, I welcome this decision because it shows that our court is working and cannot be manipulated by the executive. It shows, listeners, that persons can have confidence in our court system. Some might not agree with the decision, but listeners, let me tell you something. At the end of the day, with the decision, Mr. Holness, the Jamaica Labour Party, must decide on a few things. The leader of the opposition has a responsibility, listeners, to uphold the Constitution. His position is embedded in this very same Constitution. As an officer of the country, if he cannot decide that his actions contravene the very Constitution that he as an officer of the land has sworn to uphold, then his position, in my mind, has become untenable. Because, listeners, herein lies someone who came up, as the court said, with a scheme. Not me, it's the court who said that. And it shows that Mr. Holness is a poor leader, because if he has to govern by fear, those undated resignation letters were to drive fear into those wins and losses, and I call them wins and losses because they signed on to it. Were they so gullible, yes, to positions that they would want to in the Senate at the sacrifice of their very own critical thinking. Listeners, the Jamaican Labour Party, the delegates, the members of Parliament on the opposition side must say if they have confidence in Mr. Holness to continue as leader. He, Mr. Holness, listeners, must figure out if he is capable of leading the party and the country. His members of Parliament on the opposition side must decide, based on this ruling, if Mr. Andrew Holness can truly lead the parliamentary opposition. The Senate must decide, that's the JLP members, they must decide if Mr. Andrew Holness can lead them. Dr. Williams must decide if Holness can represent them to to an election victory. Audley Shaw or any other challenger in the party must decide if now is the time, if now is the hour to mount a challenge again for the leadership of the JLP. Listeners, we know the Jamaican Labour Party is broken. Bar said it, not me. Mr. Holness' position is untenable because of this ruling. But listeners, he should decide. But I want to give him my unsolicited advice. I want him to go back and listen to the speech given by former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson to delegate at the last conference. And he said the party is essential. Andrew must decide if it is him or the party. And is he holding the Jamaican Labour Party as hostage, considering and seeing that the writing is on the wall that he's not a competent leader. And I ask, how many more Vaz do we need? How many more James Robertson do we need? How many more Othniel Lawrence do we need? How many more John Gordon Webley do we need? And how many more Arthur Williams do we need to realize? Listeners, at the beginning of this commentary, you heard Mr. Holness speak about this country being his, and he spoke about credibility. You draw your own conclusion. And I want to take you back to last week's commentary by my co-host, listeners. He came to us and he emphatically said to us and tried to prove that Mr. Holness is not a weak leader. I say to you, listeners, do not buy into that fallacy. It is a sham and it is a farce. And that, listeners, is In Perspective.
That was In Perspective.